back and forth. We don't have a center of being. And so through meditation, yoga, we develop that center of gravity. They call it sthita prajna in the East, or steady wisdom. And then you become one thing, not a million things. As he pointed out, that we're very different. We're a different person when we're angry, a different person when we're fearful, and a different person when we're calm. So these are some of the teachings of Gurdjieff as seen through the eyes of Ouspensky in a book that he did called The Fourth Way, The Way of the Sly Man. These are question answers with his students based on the Gurdjieff teachings. So the question, can energy be stored? Because he always spoke about spiritual energy. We talk about spiritual energy too. And I think people who practice this path are very aware of the energy. Once the Kundalini energy is awakened, we know when we're filled with that divine elixir. And sometimes when we get Shaktipat, we feel flooded with it, tremendously uplifted with it, by it. And we feel like in a divine state. But then a funny thing happens. We lose it. Why do we lose it? What happens? We have to learn the mechanism of why we lose it. We have to learn what makes us lose it. He calls it a leak. We have leaks. We leak this energy. So Ouspensky says, yes, energy can be stored when you're able to store it. But at first, the question is not about storing, but about not wasting. We would have enough energy for everything we want to do if we did not waste it on unnecessary things. There are many ways that energy can be leaked, but the worst of all is expressing negative emotions. And that's what the theme of tonight is, expressing negative emotions. This is a profoundly interesting and profoundly rewarding understanding. And it's very important to struggle with the expression of negative emotions. Ouspensky says, if you can stop the expression of negative emotions, you will save energy and never feel the lack of it. We can only hope to become conscious beings if we use in the right way the energy that is now used in the wrong way. So he's saying we don't need more energy. We have plenty of energy. As we just waste it through negative states, anger, fear, and sadness, and so on, jealousy. And we waste energy that we have through these negative states. Shaivism says something similar. My favorite quotation, I am Shakti Daridra Samsara Uchyate. He is a bound soul who has poverty of Shakti, who's lacking energy. And elsewhere in Spandakarikas, it says that depression is like a thief that comes and steals all your wealth from you, takes all your energy away. So in other words, your negative emotions are like thieves that you let into your house and they steal everything from you. This is what he's talking about as a leak. So he says, the machine can produce enough energy, but you can waste it on being angry or irritated or something like that. And then very little remains. The normal organism produces quite enough energy, not only for all the centers, but also for storing, for all the work that you need to do in life. Production is all right, but expenditure is wrong. Reducing it to kind of economics. Production is good, but we're spending too much. These leaks have to be studied because with some kinds of leaks, it's not worth going on until they're stopped. For the more one accumulates energy, the more will leak out. That's very interesting also. Said, you can't just keep getting more and more energy because you'll just leak it some more. So you have to study the ways you leak energy. And every one of us has to do this for themselves. We can listen to what the wise tell us. The wise say that every time you have a tantrum, you're losing energy. Every time you give way to paranoia or fear, you lose energy. Every time you get attached to something, you lose energy. Every time you get into an aversion, a hatred, you lose energy. And you have to look and see that these are absolutely true. I can say that in my own experience, I've seen that every one of those statements is completely true. That whenever I get caught in one of those states, I become depleted of energy. So he says, we have to learn that, not just acquire energy. That's part of it, but it's also not to leak it. He says it would be like pouring water into a sieve. If you just pour it, it just leaks out. Certain negative emotions produce precisely such leaks. In certain situations, some people go through a whole range of negative emotions so habitual they do not even notice them. It's true that when we don't examine ourselves, we don't start to know ourselves, we can manifest all kinds of negative movements that are bad for us without even knowing that we're doing that. And they're very mature and accomplished people who do these things without understanding it. That's why they become addicted to alcohol and other kinds of things. It may occupy only 5 minutes or 5 seconds, but it may be sufficient to spend all the energy their organism produced for 24 hours. I want particularly to draw your attention to this idea of negative emotion and the state of negative emotion. It's necessary to realize that there's not a single useful negative emotion useful in any sense. What? Not a single. My anger, yes, it's useful. People cultivate anger. They think it's appropriate, and so on. How about jealousy? Jealousy is beautiful. Negative emotions are all a sign of weakness. I remember when I first read that really struck me. I wanted to say, what are you talking about? What? They're all a sign of weakness. Next, we must realize that we can struggle with them. They can be conquered and destroyed because there's no real center for them. If they had a real center, like the instinctive emotions, there'd be no chance we would remain forever in the power of negative emotions. And say they're not real. If they were real, we'd be really in trouble, because then the anger center would come up and we'd always be in that state. So they're not real. He says, it's lucky for us they have no real center. It's an artificial center that works. And this artificial center can be abolished. We call that the ego, that artificial center. When this is done, we'll feel much better for it. Even the realization that it is possible is very much to understand that. But we have many convictions, prejudices, and even principles about negative emotions. So it's very difficult to get rid of the idea that they are necessary. I'm saying, really believe that your anger is not necessary. It's not your friend. We spoil our life by negative emotions for which nature has not even provided a center, so that we must make one artificially. Which means like anger becomes our center. There are certain people who anger is their center of their life. They live from the point of view of anger. But it's not a real center, it's a phony center. Or fear. Some people live in fear all the time. And so that fear becomes their center. Or depression, or self-pity. Some people live in a state of self-pity. Or some people live in the state of lack, or not being, not getting enough, somehow always missing out. That's a false center they build, but they live their life like that the whole way.